Welcome to Be the Person podcast. I really cannot wait for you to hear from today's guest. I've known Dr. Travis Hearne for several years. He is a Marine Corps veteran, author, speaker, has so much incredible knowledge for us today. Welcome, Travis, to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Ann. It's awesome to be here. No, it's a privilege. When you were telling me about your podcast and what you were doing, it was a no-brainer, and I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I love all the things that you're doing, especially in the leadership realm. I know you do a lot, but I want to really dive into leadership today. But before we do this, tell the audience a little bit about you and then what you do today and how you got to where you are.
Yeah, so I do a lot today. My wife would say I do too much, but in the realm of leadership, so what I do today is I'm the CEO of Titanium Consulting Group, and we travel around the globe, and we work with executives on leading holistically healthy lives. And what we talk when I talk about holistically healthy lives is, and we'll probably dive into this a little bit more later, is just we need to be able to live mentally healthy, emotionally healthy, physically healthy, financially healthy, and spiritually healthy. So those are kind of the pillars that we use to define holistic health. So me and a crew of awesome people go around and we talk to leaders, and we do we do keynote engagements, we do consulting, we do coaching with people to really pull out true like leadership ownership in them and their organizations, to help them to take ownership of being a leader. And kind of how I got here was I've spent 10 years in the United States Marine Corps, back and forth from Iraq in 2008, 2009, Afghanistan in 2010, and I saw the full spectrum of what leadership can do. I saw leadership that literally cost lives, and I saw leadership that literally saved lives. So when I started to think about leadership and how I wanted to dive into this world, the spectrum is those two things. And what I can have impact on is how people lead within those two ends of the spectrum. So diving in with leaders and helping them to live those holistically healthy lives literally can save lives. And we've seen it happen. So after my Marine Corps career, I started working in the corporate world, went back to school, got my doctorate in organizational change and leadership, continued to nerd out on all things organizational change and leadership, and wrote my first book, Hybrid, a guide for successful leading on-site and remote teams, back in 2020. So it just walks people through, hey, we are in this new world of remote and hybrid leadership. How do we do this? So it helps people to understand, how do we lead remote teams. And then my next book is coming out in November, called Through the Storm. It goes into the analogy of, hey, the buffalo. The buffalo is the only herd animal that when a storm comes over the horizon, it grabs up its herd and it goes straight into the storm. It doesn't go around it, doesn't run away from it, it goes straight into the storm because, one, they know that they're going to get on the other side of that storm quicker. And two, if they stay together as a herd and they move through the storm together, they will survive, and they'll come out wiser and better prepared for the next storm. So I took that analogy and crafted a bunch of leadership lessons out of it. So that's going to be out in November. And yeah, we love, and I love leaders, and I love when I see leaders just reach their potential and live holistically healthy lives.
That's awesome. I can't wait to dive into all things leadership because that's one of my very favorite topics. I couldn't agree more. I believe organizations and people rise and fall on leadership. So it has such a significant impact there. If we went back and we said, what's one thing that people would be surprised about you, or one fact, what would you tell people?
Man, the surprise about me, and this was one thing that, so when I talk about holistically healthy leadership, the physical health was one thing that I really dive into. And I will say it's partly because of and meeting you and what you do with Orange Theory is like the physical. I used to weigh 245 pounds of really not good weight. I was a pretty big dude before I joined the Marine Corps. So, and I just was I didn't take care of myself. I was overeating, over drinking, all the different things that you do that when you're trying to, cover up for whatever is going on underneath all of that. So I used to be a very big guy, very, very big guy. I think 245 pounds is when I entered the Marine Corps. I was upwards of 260, probably in the early 2000s. So that's one of the things that why I dig into that physical health component so often with people I talk to, is just because I've seen the other side of it, and it is not a great way to live.
Wow. I had no idea of that. I feel like I've known you for several years and just had no idea that that was an issue. So I love to ask that question because it always uncovers something that we don't know.
Yeah, absolutely, and it not a lot of people know. They feel like I think I've burned all the pictures from, like, pre-2006, so
Yeah,
you won't find pictures even in the social media age. I've made sure to clean up my, my online posts, so none of those photos resurface anytime soon.
you know what, though? I love showing some of those because it really shows where you came from because nobody would imagine that seeing you now. Because as long as I've known you, you've been super fit. You look at you and you would never know that you had that struggle. So I think, thank you for sharing. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that's all of us. It's when you look at someone, you never know, like, and this is another leadership thing. You never understand what's going on under the surface, what they've been through in their past. And when we talk about leadership, everybody brings something with them to their worldview of leader as a leader is crafted by something in their past, by lots of things in their past. So when we talk about all these things and like all those things really matter, and like me just being really overweight helped me in what I do today. Just the fact that, like, hey, I was able to change and do. I had to join the Marine Corps to do it, but I was able to change and able to morph things, and that's part of my story. That's part of why I add this physically healthy component to the leadership coaching and consulting, is because it's amazingly it's incredibly important to being a good leader and just functioning well. And look at cognitively, all the different science stuff comes out and say physical health is a huge leadership component.
Yeah. You're talking my language because I've seen it so many times at Orange Theory where people, they come in to lose weight or to get in better shape, whatever the case is, but you see so many different aspects in their life change. Like they become better leaders, they become better parents. When you change the person in the mirror and it changes more than just their body, it really changes that mindset.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's huge. Mindset is enormous. When you can change someone's mindset and give them that confidence, no matter what you're talking about, whether it's health, whether it's sports, whether it's leadership, whatever that is, if you can help change that mindset and add that little bit of confidence, which Orange Theory does in a very good way. I you guys have smoked me. You guys smoked me for years. It was great. I loved it.
Yes. Um, that's good. So, I've watched you over the years and you've really, I saw you go back to school to become a doctor. You've really helped so many different leaders. Tell us about the journey. You alluded to it a little bit, but why the call specifically for leadership?
Yeah, I mean, when I was in Iraq and Afghanistan, I was pretty young. I was 24, 25 when I went to Afghanistan and Iraq and then Afghanistan, I think I was 27. But like when you think about that level of importance of getting things right, there really are no higher stakes. And when you look and saw some of the amazing leaders that were from my battalion commander all the way down to my direct boss, and when you look at those men and women who are in control of that big of stakes, and the way that they operate and the way that they carry themselves and just the way that they talk to people, the Marine Corps is a little bit different as far as talking to people wise. There's a lot more yelling and maybe cussing and knife hands, but it's effective in some way, shape, or form. But when you look at the way when you peel it back and you start looking at the way other people's behavior impacts others, my behavior as a leader has a direct impact on people that I have influence over, and that can go so many different ways. And when I started to look at big level leadership and politics and the influence that just individuals had on people and the way that they could sway them and the way that they could convince them and the way that they could help them or hurt them, that there to me, like you said, and there's nothing more important than being able to have some kind of positive impact on someone else. And as a leader, that's the core job of a leader, is to be able to build up other people and to do the hard things. So when we look at those two things, like doing the hard things and being able to build up other people, like what better like life story or what better career objective can be than that? Like to be able to do that. Go through hard things because you can go through hard things and build up people enough to go through hard things with you and help to lead them through that and get them on the other side of that storm or whatever that is. And so when I think about kind of the why behind all of this, it's just like that we can change, like, and this is going to sound corny, and I apologize to your listeners, but like we can truly change the world if we take control of our sphere of influence. If we can control what we can control as leaders, and we take ownership of leading within that circle of influence that we can have, and that starts to ripple effect out, that is how we are going to impact change on a big scale. Is if we start off with what we can own, and like as leaders, what we can own and what we can have control over and what we can influence. Once we understand those things, and we can do it in a way that is promoting others, that is kind, that is powerful, that is strong, that all those things that seem to be conflicting ideas, like kindness and strength. Like a lot of sometimes those ideas can be conflictual, and like that's but it doesn't have to be if you can do those things simultaneously. So for me, help like just learning about all that stuff, and learning, like when I was going to school, learning all the theory behind leadership. And there's actual theory, like written, tried and true theory that we learn about, like, hey, the transformational leadership theory and how to transform others. There's ecological, all these things that I nerded out for like 4.5 years on. They are true tools to help us to build up leaders to just be able to take care of people, and to and I am a firm believer that if you take care of your people, your organization will inevitably scale, will inevitably be successful, because you're taking care of your people towards a mission, towards a vision that you set forth as a leader. But you're taking care of people on the way to get to that, to those visions and those missions. And that's what makes leadership so important, is like, and that's what makes organizations successful. That's what makes people successful. That's the kind of the recipe for me.
Yeah.
I said
I
a
just
lot there, and I'm not kind of I'm weaved in and out of the question every now and then, but
I followed you and I got it. I really did like all of that because I think it's so incredibly true. The saying that your manager, your leader has more of an effect on your health than your doctor has always stuck with me because I think back to my own corporate career and I had a phenomenal boss and she was really, really great. But before that, I had some that were really horrible. And so you take both ends of the spectrum and compare them. And I just think, wow, what is the type of leader I want to be? Because I see it in our organization and we're pretty small. But if I lead the people that report to me well, they lead the people that report to them well. And it trickles down into then our members and our community. And so I may only have a small influence on just a couple of people at this point, but they have an influence on so many more people, and I love to think about it that way.
yeah. And like it's not just physical health, like health in general, like mental health. And there was some studies that came out this year, and after COVID, it's just the mental health problem has just increased so much. But like as far as an employee, an employee's leader has a larger impact on their mental health than their counselor or their spouse. That's another stat that came out too. It's just like there's so much at stake as far as leading well, as far as the ripple effect that you talked about, as far as making sure people are mentally and emotionally healthy, and you're creating spaces for creativity for people to be to grow, and just to be better people. So, and like when you're leading that way and people see that, they want to lead that way as well. And it just, like you said, it just continues to compound, and it continues to grow, and it continues to bleed into different sectors of the world.
Yeah. So important because sometimes in business, I'm guilty of this. Like we look at the numbers, we look at the outcome,
Mhm.
but at the same time, it's been challenging for me to just slow down and take time for people because
Yeah.
they matter. They all matter. And so, yeah, that's been one of my things I've really, really focused on this year.
Yeah, and it's huge. That's the people make the business. Without people, there's no business.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I can't wait to read your new book, because I love your analogy of the buffalo and taking people through the storm. And, as leaders, I think we walk through a lot of storms, and some of them we walk through on a personal level, whether it's death, divorce, depression. We have a lot that we walk through personally. And then I think there are other times as a leader where you walk through it with your team, maybe a decline in business, COVID happens, something changes in your business model, and you're taking people through that. And I'd love to dive into both of those. And I would just preface by saying, I really do believe that everybody is a leader. Whether you have that title or not, you're a leader of your family. You have influence in the place that you work. But let's talk first, if we can, about the personal side. When you're going through, a personal storm, but yet you're in charge of an organization or, a team, what advice would you give for that leader?
Man, so I have a story. I got a story to tell. So, this was one, and it's a chapter in the book, but it's about overcoming failure, like the storm of overcoming failure. And it's one where this was probably the most significant leadership failure of my life, and it's crafted a lot of the things that I do. So, in 2007, I just got into my first Marine Corps unit, first Light Armor Reconnaissance Battalion out in Camp Pendleton, California. I was a steely-eyed, just they cut all that weight off me pretty quick. So I felt really good going into camp and moving to California and getting my first unit. So we I got there and I met everybody. And the first thing that we did, we all went out. We were getting ready to deploy to Iraq. I didn't know that. I knew I just got to the battalion. And we were getting ready to deploy to Iraq. And I we were hiking out to what was called Red Beach. It was a beach that was probably 6 miles away from where our base was. We're hiking out to Red Beach and to engage in what we called the Highlander games. We were the Highlanders, so that was our call sign. And this was just like a primal raw. There was like tanker bar toss, tug of war, and one of the events that we engaged in was ground fighting, where you had to stay on your knees. And it was like a big Royal Rumble. I don't know if anybody out there remembers the Royal Rumble, where it's just a whole bunch of people going after each other, trying to tap each other out. It's a beautiful dance of violence and technique. But so they threw me in the ring for this event. So there's 20 Marines lined up, 10 on one side, 10 on the other, and we're facing each other. And they put me down on my knees. And I'm like, okay, this is I just came out of boot camp. I feel great about what's about to happen. And then they put another Marine in front of me who's this 6'6", 6 foot. He's this gangly. I was like, oh man, this poor kid. I'm gonna just move on. I'm gonna tap this kid out, and I'm gonna move on to the next Marine. It's gonna be. I'm gonna be the champion at the end of the day. It's gonna be great. So on the count of go, you're just supposed to go after each other. And so they started yelling, and they say 1, 2, 3, and they yell go. About 8 to 10 seconds later, I start opening my eyes and I see the blue sky like on top of me, not knowing that I'd been choked out in probably like 3 seconds. And I had Marines pulling me to the side. And were like, man, that was quick. They pulled me away. And this is not my failure. The Marine that pulled me, that tapped me out, that 6'4" gangly guy, was named Jacob Light. Come to find out, Jacob, besides being an incredible ground fighter, he had been injured in Iraq before. He was a Purple Heart recipient, and had fought tooth and nail to get back to our battalion to deploy again. And so I was like, okay, I got to learn as much as I can about this guy. I love, like, I just want to learn from him. I want to. I'm scared. We're going to Iraq. This is real. So I'm going to learn from that guy as much as I can. So I grabbed onto Jake and like just learned as much as I could from him. We made it to Iraq. Our guys, we made it kind of up the leadership chain together. We started leading Marines. We started just building this really good relationship with one another. We make it back from Iraq. It was great. Did not lose one Marine in Iraq, which was fantastic. Make it through the deployment cycle to Afghanistan. We go to Afghanistan, and our Marines are training together. They're running together. And then we get a month into our Afghanistan deployment, and Jacob gets killed by an IED. So he gets blown up. And so this was where the failure came in. And I was leading my team, and we've been working with Jake and his team for a year before this. And I went into the worst headspace I could have ever gotten into. I went into vengeance mode. I went into the worst leadership mindset you can get. I was so focused on figuring out who put the IED in, the who, what, when, where, why, and how of everything that could happen. And I used my Marines. I ran them into the dirt for the next 5 days. They didn't eat hardly anything. They barely slept. And then on day 5, we were out in the sands of Afghanistan trying to figure out what happened. And we pulled back in on day 5, and my staff sergeant and I pulled me aside and said, you're benched. Look at your Marines' faces. They are broken, they're beat, they are starving, they're sleep deprived, and you were leading them into the dirt. He's like, you did not even close to mourn. We all knew Jake. We knew him, we knew his Marines. It's sad, and you didn't take the time to even acknowledge that. So that is the biggest like leading my Marines the way that I did in a combat situation where I could have cost them their lives, changed the way that I think about leading and lead in those situations. And that's where the holistically healthy leadership principles came from. It is I was not leading physically healthy, emotionally healthy, mentally healthy, spiritually healthy. Though I was not leading from any place of health at all. After about 2 weeks of sitting on the sidelines, my Marines were getting me and my Marines. We were both on the sidelines. We weren't going out. We were benched. Um, I started to grieve. I started to think. I started to kind of get my senses back about me that I was doing this the wrong way, and having to go back to each of my Marines and apologizing to them and saying, "Hey, that was I screwed up big time. Do you forgive me? What can I do to make it better?" And luckily through that process and through like the really introspection of what I had to do to figure out who I was as a leader and who I wanted to be and how I wanted to protect my Marines instead of use them as a tool to get to a means to an ends, which a lot of leaders fall into, using their people as tools rather than people. So after apologizing, we got back on the trucks and we finished out the deployment in a great way. So some of the lessons that I learned there is just like when we're facing storms, when we're leading people, we have to understand that one, our people are our best asset. Our people are our greatest asset, and we can, as a team, do things way better than an individual or a dictator would. And then understanding that, hey, emotion plays a big part of leadership, and we have to understand that emotional intelligence aspect of it, where as leaders, we need to check in with ourselves to figure out how we're feeling. What are we projecting onto our teams? How are we operating? Is this helpful? Is this not helpful? So some of those things, like when we're going through leadership storms, that we can pull back the onion on and be like, okay, this about the situation or is this about something else? So having the emotional intelligence to be able to pull that back is something that is it's super important.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your service for all those years and for the deployments to our country. That I don't think it goes unnoticed. I'm sure by myself and the audience out there of just putting your life at risk.
Thank you. Yeah, it was like I said, it shaped my entire life, and I'm super happy to have done it.
Hey guys, I put all of my favorite things on my website, bethepersonco.com. Check it out. You'll find all of my favorite books, supplements, proteins. I always love to learn from people and what they're taking, so I put all of mine in one place. The link is in the show notes. Check it out.
I'm thinking about that story and then thinking about just you're right, how important emotional intelligence is in leading because we can get caught up. I know I can get caught up in my own head and go in with whatever emotion we're feeling, whether it's fear or scarcity or just drive to get it done. We want to push through. How do you what advice would you have or what would you maybe even tell younger Travis as you're sitting, there benched 2 weeks? Like, to figure out how do you do that? Because it sounds easy. It sounds like figure out your emotions, but in the midst of the storm, I think that can be really challenging.
Absolutely, and it's almost impossible when you're in that mindset. It's almost like your brain goes into the it goes you go back brain, and it's really hard to think about your emotions and how those are like, it's hard to have be introspective when you're that heightened. But one would be you gotta find a place to calm down. You have to be able to come to a baseline of, hey, you need whether it's box breathing, whether it's some kind of breathing techniques, some kind of something to be able to calm yourself down, to calm your central nervous system down to a point where you can see the bigger picture of what's going on rather than just the situation. So when we go through storms, it's just about okay, even when we're not quite going through them, but when we're approached, when we see them coming over the horizon, like okay, take deep breaths, figure out how I'm feeling, how are others feeling, how can I use these emotions to best suit what's going to happen. And then like it's about bringing people. We talk about the herd aspect. It's about bringing other people around you. Nobody can do this alone. Leadership can get very lonely, And you can also get to the point where if you're going through certain storms, you can the leaders just want to put their some leaders I am totally guilty of this. They want to put their heads down and they're just going to get through it. They're going to do it. They're going to do everything themselves. They're just going to get through it. But you need your herd in order to do this well. It's that's the same concept. Like if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. So if you're in that spot, like if I were to say to myself, like, hey, who around you, who are your buddies around you that you can bring in and just like, hey, I need you to calm me down. I need you to tell me some truths. I need you to tell me I need you to help me out here. Otherwise, leadership can be an extremely lonely place, and it can be a place where people just experience burnout and just all the negative things of leadership come when you do try to do things alone. Cotter's 8 steps, one of them is you enlist a volunteer army in your peer group and like all these things that like you bring people around you. Like, if you look at any textbook, any leadership book, it's going to be all about, hey, who are the people around you that can help support you in any when you are going through any storm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that takes like a level of vulnerability,
Mhm.
which for me was I had to learn, and I honestly had to learn kind of the hard way on because I used to think of it as a weakness. And really, when I got into it and I saw how much courage it took to be vulnerable, either with my team or with peers, whoever it was, to say, hey, I have this issue or I'm going through this. Talk to me a little bit about vulnerability and where that falls in.
Man, I don't know. I'm a huge Brene Brown fan,
Yeah.
and like some of her stuff on vulnerability is amazing. Like, if anybody wants like just a crash course in vulnerability, just look at some of her stuff. But like vulnerability, like without being vulnerable, you can't really be 100% honest or truthful with your people. So, and it leaves them guessing as a leader. You're making your people guess how you're feeling when you're open and when you're honest and you're vulnerable. And this is and there's a level of this that you have to balance as a leader as far as like what you are going to share with people that work for you, honestly. But when you have people around you that are outside of that sphere of like, hey, do you work for me, the employee employer relationship, then you can like being vulnerable is such a healthy thing. And being it is just it's such a way that you can release so much in being vulnerable that you're not going to bring to your team meetings, that you're not going to bring to to the whatever task you have. When you can release and be vulnerable with other people, you can understand and unpack how you're feeling, what you're doing, how you're going to do this, and you can honestly gain some really tangible tools to be better at your job by being vulnerable with people, because it opens the door to feedback. It opens, which is huge. Feedback is an amazing, amazing thing. I didn't think so for a very long time, but feedback is very good. But it opens the door to a lot of tangible things that can help you become a better leader. And it brings and it creates relationships around you that are strong, that are truthful, that someone can like. I have people around me that could pull me aside and be like, Travis, you are screwing up big time. Knock it off. And I'd be like, oh, okay. So it builds that kind of trust with people as well.
Yeah. I agree. And that again, it was I think it's hard for most people to learn. It was hard for me to learn as well and to just not kind of put your head down and grind through it alone.
Yeah.
But really see the power. And it is, like you said, it's the power in the relationship that it
Mhm.
builds with the people that will speak into your life, because that's what I want. I want people that are speaking in, because as the leader, sometimes it can be lonely. Like you're the one at the end of the day that is making the decision.
Yeah.
But I want a whole bunch of people around me that are speaking into that decision too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's so important.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit. Let's talk. I know that was, about walking through a personal storm through leadership. Tell me a little bit about advice you would have. Somebody's taking a team through it. And I saw this several times at the bank. I led in 2008 when the financial crisis happened and we were taking our team through it. Just several other times of how you lead a team through a storm and what advice would you give that leader?
Yeah. So it's kind of a lot of pre work when it comes to that. When you're leading your team through a storm, there's a couple things you have to have foundationally that will help you get through the storm better and that you can bounce back off of. One is going to be the culture that you establish early on. If you are leading any kind of a team, any size of a team, whether it's one person, two people, whatever that looks like, create a culture, set cultural standards and your true north for what your team will do, And that is something that when you're going through the storm, you can bounce off of. You can go back to. You can really rely on that to help get you through the storms in a healthy way. And then like and this is going to sound like every other leadership book that you ever hear, crafting your mission and your vision, all those things. It's repetitive, but it's really important. You have to have, as a leader, those foundational principles. That way, when you go through the storms, you have something. You have your footing about you. You can work through it because you know what you're working towards. Your vision, you know how you're going to get there, and your culture. You know that the people that are bought in to what you guys are about to go through. So buy-in from your team is a huge piece of getting through successfully pulling your team and getting your herd to go through the storm. And they had then and one of the a really good tool for this is having your team craft those vision statements, those mission statements, and that culture with you. It's not those are not created in silos. Allow them to have the input on what the culture is going to be, what the mission, where there's an overall company mission of, hey, we need to get X amount of widgets out by January. That's a storm we're about to go through, but like the mission of how you're going to go there and incorporating your vision. So having them buy into that is also extremely important. So buy-in from your team is huge, and you're only going to get that by being vulnerable to a point where you can craft things together and let go of control a little bit. Let go of control so you can take control. And that's how you can create those things, those foundational principles that'll get you through any storm.
Yeah. And I know somebody's out there and they probably need to rewind that and listen again because as a leader, letting go of control is always hard. So, and sometimes that is the key to getting your team through the storm. So I love that you said that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, put people on your team. I put people on my teams that are way smarter than me. People at my company, they are way smarter than I am, and it's on purpose. Because like if I don't like if we're going through a storm together, I can bring in people that know way more about me than what we're doing, and they can take charge. It's empowering your people. It's letting go of control. But it is, again, it is a balance. If you are leading the people, there's a certain level of leadership and ownership you have to take of what the outcome is, and that's important as well. But letting go of some of that control of the how is really really important.
Yeah. I think once we get through the storm, talk to me a little bit about we can breathe a sigh of relief and think, I made it. But then as a leader, I think often we just go on to the next thing. We don't take that time. And I know, and I don't know if you bring in the pillars here, but how do you coach people to be overall healthy leaders?
Yeah, I mean, the coaching aspect of it, the pillars are great for this. So when you're in, and this is kind of my philosophy of life and leadership, like you're either in a storm, going through a storm, or you're preparing for the next storm. Those are the three phases of life. Because storms are going to come. So we're either locked in one of those three. But when you're preparing for the storm, that is when you can reassess. Okay, how did you handle the last storm? What did you learn? What have you learned from the past? And then how are we going to be holistically healthier moving forward into the next storm? So always learn from your past. That's the number one thing. Like if we're going to coach somebody, hey, what did we do in the past that did not work? What have we done in the past that has worked? And how can we use that moving forward in what we're about to do or prepare for the next, whatever that is? And then it dives into each of the pillars. So you talk about, okay, how mentally healthy are we as a team? And it's not mental health is not just an individual sport, it's a team sport. So being a mentally healthy and emotionally healthy team, those are two of the pillars that we focus on is on how do you get to a point where you're able to take that breath. You're able to be like, okay, this is what I need. I need to see a counselor. I need to take a walk. I need to like all those different things that really support mental and emotional health while you're in preparation for whatever's coming next, while you're in that kind of pause period where you're able to take a breath is making sure that those two pillars are taken care of. And then spirituality, whatever that looks like for you, it's understanding that that plays a big part in it as well. It's not a small thing. It's a big part of a lot of people's lives, mine included. And then we talk physically. How are you going to be physically prepared for this next storm? So it's really outlining those pillars and almost like different wavelengths to be able like, okay, here I feel like I'm here. And what we do with our people is like, okay, grade yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 on how you are in each one of these pillars, and then tell me where you want to be on each one of these pillars. And as we start preparing for the next storm, we're going to focus on getting you to level up on where you want to be in those pillars. So Someone wants to be more physically healthy. Okay, let's get that done. Here's a plan. Here's an hour a day to do whatever. Mentally healthy. How does that work? What programs can we get you into? And then the financially healthy piece is part of the is about the business. Like, okay, this is what we learned from the business. How do we ensure that we are prepared financially, business model wise, scaling wise for the next thing that comes as a team? So when you're doing kind of a group coaching model, when you're talking to the entire team, the business is a big piece of it because you wouldn't be a team without the business. Without that part of it, you would not you there would be no team. So that's an important piece too. Is like, okay, once we have this foundation of holistic health with mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual, this all drives towards how are we going to be successful as a business. So we sit down, talk about all those, and also we can't forget about the celebrating the wins. The storm, within every storm, there are wins to be had. With every problem, with every project, there are wins to whether you failed significantly, there are wins to be had. So we need to recognize those, pull those out, and celebrate them, and acknowledge that yeah, we had some wins in this spot, in this spot, in this spot. Acknowledge those, and help motivate us, and then discipline us towards the next storm.
Yeah. Such good information. In fact, I'm just thinking about our own internal team and just thinking about, yeah, of looking at each of those areas and really saying, where am I at now and where do I want to be? Because life is busy. I think we all get thrown into the day to day, and sometimes zooming out and really looking at that big picture is important.
Yeah, and looking, I mean, and that's the big thing too, is we have to be able to reassess these things after every storm. Like once we go through something, it's like, okay, now my mental health meter's way down, or my physical health meter's way down. Our business health went way down. Like how do we balance all those things out? So pulling it back and re-looking at those and continuously working on those is key.
I know that you deal with a lot of different leaders, both in the military and non-military. Tell me a little bit about what are the maybe habits that you see from the healthiest leaders you work with?
Man, well, we talked about one of them, the vulnerability piece. The most healthy leaders I see, they're vulnerable to a point where they have people around them that they can truly trust with anything, with telling them anything, giving them honest feedback. Feedback is the next one. They're able to take and incorporate and use feedback to become better leaders. They're not shut off to it. They're not averse to it. They welcome it. They ask for it. So they're continuously getting better, and that goes into continuously learning. Some of the best leaders out there are always learning about what's the next thing I could like if I'm in the tech world, for instance, okay, what's the next latest and greatest tech thing that I can learn to be able to make me better so I can lead my team better. So they are always well informed. They're not always the smartest person in the room, which is the next one. Is like they don't have to. A lot of them they bring people around them that are smarter and better equipped than them at that specific job that they're doing. I don't need to be the best financial person when I have a really great financial person that can do all that really well. I need to lead that team well, but it's just it's that's so the other leaders bring great people around them, and that's also and letting go of control when you need to let go of control. We talked about that also. They are able to bring in feedback. Able to have brainstorming sessions where they don't always have to be right. And the last thing I would say is they're incredible listeners. They are almost last to speak, but they are very intently, actively listening to what's going on around the room. And they're learning, again, back to that continuous, they're learning from what everybody else is saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So good. I know that if you're driving or jogging or whatever you're doing, you're gonna wanna go back and write those things down because I think those are really, really important habits and something I know I'm gonna go back and write down because I think you're spot on with all of those.
Thank you. Yeah. And also the physical capacity, this one. I have to plug the Orange Theory thing, man. Like I was the healthiest leader when I was the healthiest physically. So that's a big component of it. And if that looks like walking, if that looks like a lot of the great leaders are there, they take time to do whatever kind of exercise or physical activity that they can. They're not stagnant. That's for sure.
Yeah, I would agree. And not just because of Orange Theory, but whatever field you're in of just I think that is super important. When you
Yes.
feel better about you and it doesn't mean size 2, it just means you're confident as the person in the mirror, you lead better.
Absolutely, and also, like, you like, take a break. I mean, I tell my team this all the time, like, they better take one meeting if they're remote, if they're gonna take they have to take one meeting outside walking around. The cognitive process that happens when you're outside, vitamin D, oxygen, all that stuff, that you're just so much more productive when you come back and sit down, if you would take an hour out of your day to just be outside for a little while. So
Mm,
it's super important.
yeah. I love all of it. And as we get ready to wrap up, I would love for you to tell us your top one or two books that you would recommend on this.
Oh my goodness. So Atomic Habits, I always have to throw Atomic Habits in there. That one is one of my favorites. That's the idea of getting better, incrementally better every day. And then this one that I just about halfway through it, High Road Leadership from John Maxwell. This one is that's the best one so far.
I couldn't agree more. I love Atomic Habits, and I'm also about halfway through I Road Leadership. And that's the book I'm currently working on. So, so good.
Gotcha. Yeah, I love it.
I know people are definitely going to want to connect with you. What's the best way for them to do that?
So on LinkedIn, find me on LinkedIn, find me on Instagram, Dr. T Hearne or Travis Hearne. That's the best way. And my website is titaniumleadershipconsulting.com. That's where you can find us and everything about what we do.
So good. I will make sure I link to all of those in the show notes as well as the books. Travis, thank you so much for being on today. Thank you for sharing all of your wisdom and knowledge. And I truly appreciate it.
Now, thank you so much, Ann, for having me. This has been a blast. I appreciate it.
If this resonated with you and you know somebody that would benefit from this leadership advice, please share it with them. And always, it would mean the world to me if you would give us a 5-star review. Thanks for joining Be the Person podcast.